Have you ever told yourself just one more episode, knowing full well you had an early morning meeting, or promised yourself you'd start that diet tomorrow while already planning your next indulgent meal? If you're human, the answer is yes. And if you think you're the exception, well, that might be the most perfect example of self-deception at work. Welcome to the hidden theater of the mind, where we are simultaneously the playwright, the actor, and the audience of our own elaborate performances. This is the story of how we lie to ourselves with such skill and conviction that we actually believe it. But here's the twist. This isn't necessarily a character flaw. It's one of the most sophisticated survival mechanisms our species has developed. Today, we're going on a journey into the labyrinthine corridors of self-deception. We'll explore why your brain has become a master storyteller, weaving narratives so compelling that even you believe them. By the end of this exploration, you'll recognize the subtle scripts running in your mind, understand why they exist, and discover how to rewrite them for a more authentic life. Chapter 1. The Mirror's Lies: What We Tell Ourselves. Let's start with a simple experiment. Right now, think about your biggest personal challenge. Maybe it's your health, your relationships, your career, or a habit you've been meaning to change. Now, listen carefully to the story you're telling yourself about it. I just don't have time to exercise. I'm naturally disorganized. I'm not a morning person. I work better under pressure. I'm just unlucky in love. These aren't just explanations. They're carefully crafted narratives that serve a very specific purpose. They protect us from the discomfort of acknowledging our agency in our circumstances. They're what psychologists call comfortable lies, stories that shield us from the anxiety of taking responsibility. But here's what's fascinating. We don't consciously choose these narratives. They emerge from the depths of our subconscious like bubbles rising to the surface of a pond. Our brain, in its infinite wisdom, has determined that these stories serve us better than the raw, unfiltered truth. Consider Sarah, a talented graphic designer who consistently procrastinates on her personal creative projects. She tells herself, "I'm just a perfectionist. I want to make sure it's absolutely right before I share it." This sounds noble, even admirable. But dig deeper and you'll find the real story. Sarah is terrified of criticism and rejection. The perfectionism narrative protects her from confronting this fear while allowing her to maintain a positive self-image. Or take Marcus, who's been almost ready to start his own business for 3 years. His story? "I'm just waiting for the right opportunity. The market isn't quite ready yet." This narrative preserves his identity as a visionary entrepreneur while protecting him from the vulnerability of actually trying and potentially failing. These stories aren't malicious lies. They're protective cocoons. They allow us to avoid the discomfort of change while maintaining our self-respect. But like all cocoons, they can become prisons if we stay in them too long. The most insidious part? We become so invested in these narratives that we unconsciously seek evidence to support them while ignoring anything that contradicts them. This is called confirmation bias, and it's self-deception's most loyal accomplice. Chapter 2. The Daily Deceptions, Our Everyday Scripts. Let's examine the small, seemingly harmless deceptions that pepper our daily lives. These are the white lies we tell ourselves so frequently that they've become background noise in our mental landscape. "I'll start tomorrow." This might be the most popular lie in human history. Tomorrow represents a mythical time when we'll have more willpower, fewer distractions, and perfect conditions. It's a temporal mirage that keeps moving further away as we approach it. Why do we do this? Because tomorrow allows us to maintain our good intentions without the discomfort of immediate action. It's not that bad. This is our brain's way of managing overwhelming situations by minimizing their significance. Your relationship might be slowly deteriorating, your health might be declining, or your finances might be spiraling, but acknowledging the full reality would trigger anxiety. So your mind dims the urgency, like adjusting the brightness on a screen that's too harsh to look at directly. I deserve this. Whether it's that expensive purchase, the extra dessert, or the binge-watching session, this phrase transforms impulsive decisions into acts of self-care or justice. It's particularly powerful because it appeals to our sense of fairness. Surely, after working hard or dealing with stress, we've earned some indulgence. Everyone does it. This is the democratization of poor choices. If everyone cuts corners, procrastinates, or makes unhealthy decisions, then our behavior isn't a character flaw. It's simply human nature. This narrative removes personal responsibility by making our choices seem inevitable and universal. I'm just being realistic. This is perhaps the most sophisticated self-deception because it masquerades as wisdom and maturity. When we lower our expectations or abandon ambitious goals, we tell ourselves we're being practical. But often we're simply protecting ourselves from the possibility of disappointment. These daily deceptions serve as emotional shock absorbers, cushioning us from the jolting reality of our choices and circumstances. They allow us to navigate life without constantly confronting uncomfortable truths. But they also create a gap between who we are and who we think we are, a gap that can widen into a chasm over time. The tragedy isn't that we tell ourselves these stories. The tragedy is that we often don't realize we're doing it. We've become so fluent in the language of self-deception that we speak it unconsciously, like a native tongue we learned in childhood. The evolutionary advantage. Why our brains lie to us. To understand why self-deception is so prevalent, we need to travel back in time, way back, to when our ancestors were navigating a world full of predators, scarce resources, and constant threats. In that environment, the ability to deceive others could mean the difference between life and death. But nature took this one step further. It gave us the ability to deceive ourselves so convincingly that our deceptions would be more believable to others. Think about it this way. If you truly believe your own story, you'll tell it with genuine conviction. Your body language will be authentic, your voice will ring with sincerity, and others will be more likely to believe you. This is what evolutionary psychologist Robert Trivers calls the self-deception advantage. We evolved to fool ourselves so we could more effectively fool others. But self-deception served other crucial functions too. Imagine our ancestor facing a dangerous hunt or a territorial dispute. If they fully acknowledged the risks, the probability of injury or death, they might be paralyzed by fear. Self-deception allowed them to minimize these risks in their minds, giving them the confidence to take necessary actions for survival. This mechanism also helped our ancestors cope with loss and trauma. In a world where death and suffering were common, the ability to construct hopeful narratives like everything happens for a reason, this will make me stronger, provided the emotional resilience needed to continue functioning and reproducing. Self-deception even played a role in social bonding. Groups that could maintain optimistic, unified narratives about their strength and righteousness were more likely to act cohesively and defeat rival groups. The tribe that truly believed they were favored by the gods fought with more determination than the tribe plagued by doubt. Fast forward to today, and we still carry these ancient mechanisms, but the environment has changed dramatically. The threats we face are no longer saber-toothed tigers, but chronic stress, complex relationships, and existential anxieties. Yet our brains still respond with the same self-deceptive strategies our ancestors used to survive predators and rival tribes. The problem is that what once helped us survive now often holds us back. The same mechanism that gave our ancestors courage to hunt dangerous animals now prevents us from having difficult conversations with our partners. The same narrative building that helped them cope with loss now stops us from processing grief in healthy ways. We're running ancient software on modern hardware, and the bugs are showing. The architecture of self-deception. How our minds build false realities. Understanding self-deception requires understanding how our minds actually work. Contrary to popular belief, we don't perceive reality directly.
Instead, our brains construct our experience of reality from incomplete information, filling in gaps with assumptions, memories, and expectations. This process happens so seamlessly that we rarely notice it. Right now, you have a blind spot in your vision where your optic nerve connects to your retina, but you don't see a black hole in your visual field. Your brain fills it in based on surrounding information. This is a perfect metaphor for how self-deception works. Our minds are constantly filling in psychological blind spots with stories that feel true. The architecture of self-deception has several key components. The confirmation engine. Once we adopt a belief about ourselves or our situation, our brain becomes a confirmation-seeking machine. We notice evidence that supports our story while unconsciously filtering out contradictory information. If you believe you're not a math person, you'll remember every struggle with numbers while forgetting instances of mathematical success. The rationalization factory. When our actions don't align with our self-image, our brain immediately gets to work manufacturing explanations. This happens so quickly that we often don't realize we're doing it. You might eat a whole bag of chips and instantly generate the story, "I was stressed and I need comfort food to cope." The emotional thermostat. Our brain monitors our emotional temperature and adjusts our stories to keep us in a comfortable range. If a truth would cause too much anxiety or depression, the mind will modify the narrative to bring emotions back to a manageable level. The identity maintenance system. Perhaps most importantly, our brain works tirelessly to maintain a coherent, positive sense of self. Any information that threatens our self-concept triggers what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, an uncomfortable tension that the mind resolves by changing either our behavior or our beliefs. Since changing behavior is difficult, we usually change our beliefs. This system is so sophisticated that it operates below the level of consciousness. We don't decide to deceive ourselves. It happens automatically, like breathing or your heartbeat. The stories emerge fully formed, complete with emotional resonance and logical justification. But here's the crucial insight. Recognizing this architecture is the first step toward freedom. Once you understand how the magic trick works, you can't be fooled by it quite as easily. The cost of comfortable lies. While self-deception once served our ancestors well, in our modern world, it often comes with a steep price. The comfortable lies we tell ourselves create what psychologists call reality gaps, the distance between what is and what we tell ourselves is true. Consider the professional cost. How many opportunities have we missed because we told ourselves we weren't ready, weren't qualified, or weren't the type of person who succeeds in that field? How many relationships have suffered because we convinced ourselves that avoiding difficult conversations was keeping the peace? The health cost is equally significant. We tell ourselves that stress isn't affecting us, that we'll address that concerning symptom later, or that we're naturally predisposed to certain health problems. Meanwhile, preventable conditions progress and modifiable risk factors remain unchanged. Perhaps most tragically, self-deception robs us of authentic self-knowledge. When we're constantly editing our internal narrative, we lose touch with who we really are beneath the stories. We become like actors who've played a role so long they've forgotten their real personality. The paradox is that the very mechanism designed to protect us from discomfort often creates greater suffering in the long run. The anxiety we avoid by procrastinating compounds over time. The conflicts we sidestep by denying problems eventually explode into larger crises. There's also a social cost. When we're not honest with ourselves, we can't be truly authentic with others. Our relationships become performances based on our self-deceptive narratives rather than genuine connections between real people. But perhaps the greatest cost is the lost potential. All the growth, achievement, and fulfillment that remain locked away behind comfortable lies. Every time we tell ourselves a limiting story, we close a door to possibility. Chapter 6. The Path to Authentic Self-Awareness. Recognizing self-deception is like developing peripheral vision for your own thoughts. It requires practice, patience, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. But the payoff, living with greater authenticity and effectiveness, is immeasurable. The first step is developing what mindfulness practitioners call observer consciousness, the ability to watch your thoughts without immediately believing them or acting on them. When you catch yourself thinking, "I'm just not good at this," pause and ask, is this objectively true, or is this a story that serves some other purpose? Start paying attention to your emotional reactions to feedback or challenges. Strong defensive responses often signal that you've bumped up against a self-deceptive narrative. If criticism makes you immediately want to explain why it's wrong or unfair, you might be protecting a story rather than responding to information. Keep a pattern journal where you note recurring themes in your excuses, complaints, and explanations. Do you often blame external circumstances? Do you frequently minimize your role in negative outcomes while maximizing your role in positive ones? These patterns reveal the architecture of your personal self-deception system. Practice the curious friend technique. When faced with a challenging situation, ask yourself what advice you'd give to a friend in the same circumstances. We're often more honest and clear-sighted about other situations than our own because we're not protecting their self-image, only they are. Most importantly, cultivate compassion for yourself in this process. Self-deception isn't a character flaw, it's a deeply human tendency that served our species well for millions of years. The goal isn't to eliminate it entirely, which would probably be impossible and potentially harmful, but to recognize it when it's limiting your growth and happiness. Remember, the stories we tell ourselves aren't inherently good or bad, they're tools. The question is whether they're serving your authentic goals or protecting you from the discomfort of pursuing them.
Living in truth. As we conclude this exploration into the hidden landscape of self-deception, it's worth reflecting on what we've discovered. We've seen that the tendency to mislead ourselves isn't a bug in human psychology, it's a feature, carefully crafted by evolution to help our ancestors survive and thrive. We've learned that our brains are constantly constructing narratives, filling in the gaps in our self-knowledge with stories that feel true but may not be accurate. We've explored how these comfortable lies can limit our potential, damage our relationships, and keep us from becoming who we're truly capable of being. But most importantly, we've discovered that awareness is the antidote. The moment you recognize a self-deceptive pattern, you create space for choice. You can decide whether that story serves you or limits you, whether it deserves your belief or your skepticism. This doesn't mean living without any self-protective narratives. That would be neither possible nor desirable. It means becoming a more conscious editor of your internal story, keeping the chapters that serve your growth and happiness while gently revising those that don't. The path to authenticity isn't about achieving perfect self-awareness. It's about developing the courage to question your own stories, the wisdom to recognize when they're helping or hindering you, and the compassion to change them when necessary. In a world full of external deceptions, from marketing messages to social media personas, perhaps the most radical act is to stop deceiving yourself. To look in the mirror and see not just who you want to be or who you think you should be, but who you actually are, complete with all your contradictions, potential, and humanity. The truth may be uncomfortable at first, but it's also liberating. In that truth lies the foundation for authentic relationships, meaningful growth, and a life lived not in the shadow of comfortable lies, but in the bright, sometimes harsh, but ultimately nurturing light of reality. Your authentic self is waiting on the other side of your stories. The question is, are you ready to meet them?